Chapter 10. Anya. Time passed at La Hacienda household. June gave way to July, and July gave way to August. With each passing day, Santiago's presence became as natural to Anya as breathing. It wasn't her plan to get this close to him. That first day, when she saw him hunched over and crying on the coffee table, she wanted to ignore it. Should have ignored it. Should have pretended she hadn't seen his suffering. But as she watched him, memories of her own past flashed in her mind. She remembered all those days she spent crying out alone outside, wishing for a different life than the one she was currently living. Even someone like her had been saved by someone stronger. Her thought, maybe I could just help him, for a little while, had sealed her fate. Since that moment, other than the days that she had to go on assignments with Javier, Santiago was constantly with her. He had followed her around like a puppy all summer long. His persistence at seeking her out and having her time perplexed Anya. She did not think of herself as a particularly interesting person. She never had. Yet, Santiago always seemed so excited to talk to her, to see her, to spend time with her. It was a strange feeling to be called upon, not for her skill set, but just for her company. Most of the time, she didn't even speak. She just let him ramble on, smiling at how he could practically talk to himself for hours. What surprised her the most was how much she began to enjoy Santiago's perpetual presence. Anya had never been around children before, much less a human child. She found his energy overwhelming, a continual cheer that she was not used to. At first, she found it exhausting, especially on the days when she was feeling in pain or fatigued from an assignment. But on the days when he was feeling sad, missing his mother or his friends, she found that the melancholy didn't suit him. Day after day, Anya received lessons on children's play, from board games to books and movies, all at Santiago's insistence. Her lack of knowledge about certain things always surprised Santiago and prompted him to ask questions such as, "What movies did you watch with your family? Did your sister ever play any games with you?" All of which she had to give awkward answers to, explaining that her parents were never home, and her sister was older than her, so they didn't spend much time together. When she said things like this, his mood would turn sour. "Sad. That sounds lonely," he would tell her in response. It startled her that her childlike mind could make assumptions from those few words, but of course he knew a thing about being alone. She replied to him, her tone carrying no emotion. "Yes, there was." Despite Santiago being a 10-year-old human child, she played with him earnestly. A particular favorite of theirs was chess, something Anya was excited about because she could tell Santiago she'd played it before, thanks to her aunt teaching her, and she beat Santiago at it every time. When he would get frustrated with her beating him, they played video games or went for a swim. The last time Anya was in the pool was when Javier taught her how to swim, something that no one bothered teaching her in her past life. Taking a leisurely swim was not something she normally did, but she found that she enjoyed it. She would spend hours playing water games with Santiago, racing back and forth in the pool, seeing how long they could both hold their breaths underwater, and doing cartwheels and handstands. Anya laughed every time Santiago splashed her face when she won, which was every time. But Santiago's favorite activity was just to lay in the garden with Anya and watch the clouds go by. It was the only time that Santiago was quiet. "I used to do it with my mama," he told her. "We would go outside, lay on the grass, and just watch the clouds go by." They were lying next to each other, close enough that if Santiago were to turn his head, she would feel his breath on her face. Laying with him in the grass like this, staring at the clouds, it was hard not to feel at peace with him. Eventually, the time neared for Santiago to go off to school for the start of the fall semester at Instituto St. John Baptiste. Anya did not know much about the school, other than it was prestigious. A prestigious private school where children of important families frequented, and of course that Ernesto had been a student there. Things were still strange between Anya and Ernesto. He no longer gave her death stares, but there was still a palpable awkwardness between them, a polite clumsiness in their few words that they exchanged, primarily from Ernesto, and he still preferred not to be in the same room as her. However, at least, he did not remove himself from the move in an aggressive manner anymore. Santiago seemed to be elated by his papa's rejuvenated attitude towards Anya. I think he really likes you, he would grin at her. Anya would just give him a smile, but not say anything else, because confirming that would be a lie. More than anything, it seemed like he was just trying to tolerate her, and she could tell that he was trying to get Santiago excited for school. The stories Ernesto would tell sent Santiago over the moon with delight. Not only did Anya have to hear the stories from Ernesto, but she would have to hear them again and again from Santiago. It always began with, "Did you know? Did you know that my papa was captain of the soccer team? Did you know he aced all his exams? Did you know that my papa was voted class president?" And Santiago's most favorite story of all, "Did you know my parents met at the same school?" Santiago squealed. "It was this school. They went to the same school for years and years, and they hated each other. But then one year, my papa saw my mama getting picked on, and he saved her, and they fell in love." "Wow," Anya said with strained effort at the ridiculous story. They were at the dinner table, and Anya was listening to Santiago tell the story for the third time through multiple bites in his mouth. "I know, right? It's awesome," Santiago said as he stuffed a plate full of enchiladas in his mouth. "My papa said she was really smart too. She got into Instituto St. Jean Baptiste through scholarships, which is why she was getting picked on, because I guess people don't like that." "I see," Anya said, trying to follow his story through his mouthful. Ernesto had gotten up from the table as soon as Anya sat down, but he was still in the kitchen, listening while eating a flan that Consuelo had made. He said playfully, "Ojo, Santiago, you never know who's going to be, you never know when you'll be looking at your future wife." It was only a moment, couldn't have been more than 2 seconds, that Santiago turned his head to face Anya. Their eyes locked, and he quickly turned his face away from hers, his cheeks turning a deep shade of scarlet. "See," Santiago responded shyly. Unsettled at what had just happened, but not knowing why, Anya turned her eyes to Ernesto, who had his back turned away from them in that moment. She gave a sigh of relief, but was confused as to why she felt so uneasy. On the first day of school, Santiago came down the stairs in a heather gray blazer, white button-up shirt, black pants, and a plaid tie. His sunshine blonde hair, which usually fell over his forehead and eyes, was combed neatly to the side. "Santiago!" Ernesto exclaimed, his arms open. Santiago walked into them shyly. "You look good, mijo," Ernesto said, hugging him and kissing the top of his head before letting go. "Gracias, papa," he said. Then his golden brown eyes turned to Anya, who was leaning against the windowsill. What do you think, Anya?" His voice was barely a whisper. Thinking he probably needed some extra encouragement today, she gave him her biggest smile and said, "You clean up very well." And she wasn't lying. Santiago was a handsome child. She watched his face at her comment as he turned away from her and to his papa. "Can Anya come with us to drop me off?" Ernesto looked uneasy at the question, but responded with a smile. "What? Am I not enough entourage for you?" "I want her to come," Santiago said, turning his head towards the pale girl who was still leaning against the window. "I'll be here when you get back," she said reassuringly, hoping that she wouldn't have to go. "But I want you to come," Santiago pouted, then looked at his papa. "Just for today, papa. Por favor." Ernesto looked at his son, who was clutching his hand now in a beseeching manner. Then his eyes looked up at Anya. Their eyes met. She gave Ernesto a shrug, as if saying, "Your choice." Ernesto looked back at Santiago, who was pleading through his eyes. He sighed and spoke. "Just for today. Anya's busy, okay?" "Yes!" Santiago cried, then held his free hand out to her. "Come on, Anya, let's go." She hesitated for a moment before stretching her own hand and linking it with Santiago's as the three of them walked to the car together. It was the longest walk Anya had ever experienced. Anya on one side, Santiago in the middle, and Ernesto on the other side, walking together as though they were a family. But that would be the furthest thing from the truth, she reminded herself. Anya knew the school would probably be something grand, considering its class of students who were in attendance, and she wasn't wrong. The school had a gray roof, beige outer bricks, and a Romanesque pointed towers. If it weren't for the amount of windows, Anya would have thought the structure centuries old. It was also very green. They had so many plants, trees, and bushes everywhere, and the structure had ivy growing on the walls. It was beautiful. "Wow!" Santiago exclaimed excitedly, his hands on the window as he looked out. "This is awesome!" "You're gonna love it," Santiago, Ernesto grinned. You're gonna meet so many people and make new friends. Yeah, Santiago said, and Anya thought she heard a strain in his voice. When they reached the drop-off point, Anya could visibly see there was something wrong with him. He had gone quiet and was twiddling his thumbs. Oh, that's Elias! Oh my god, I haven't seen him since he went back to the US. And look, Santiago, he has a kid with him. Hold on, I'll be right back, Ernesto blurted out excitedly, and he opened the door, being the first one out. Anya watched Santiago proceed from twiddling his thumbs to adjusting his tie. She gently tapped his leg with the end of her foot. What's wrong? She asked him. He looked at her like a deer caught in headlights, and it was a moment before he answered. When he did, he said, Papa did so well in school. What if I do badly? What if no one likes me? I don't know anyone at the school. I'm worried I'll disappoint him. Anya gave a deep sigh and closed her eyes as she remembered those days when she had to be present with her family, the malicious comments and disgusted faces as she encountered them down the hall. Was that her? Oh my, I thought it was only a rumor. To think King Luca actually kept her. She is a stain upon the family. Anya felt a pang in her chest as she heard those words. She turned to see a group of women, dressed impeccably, staring at her with disdain. They whispered among themselves, but their words felt like knives piercing through her. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. If it hadn't been for her aunt... Hold your head high, Anya. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You're just as good as any of those vultures. When she opened her eyes, she looked at Santiago, whose head was hung low. She spoke clearly. Listen to me, Santiago. She watched Santiago raise his head, his eyes pitiful. She hunched closer to him until their faces were only inches apart, bearing into his eyes as if she could give him the strength just by looking at him. You are Santiago del Toro, she said, grandson of Javier del Toro, and son of Ernesto del Toro, heir to DT and Associates Corp. Know who you are, and carry yourself with pride. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Santiago's eyes widened at her words, and he was about to say something when Ernesto opened the car door. Anya quickly fell back into her seat, distancing herself away from him. If Ernesto looked suspicious, Anya didn't know, so she didn't dare to look at him. Santiago, come on, I have someone here who wants to meet you, he said. Anya saw Santiago sit up and square his shoulders. He looked at Anya and told her firmly, as though it was a promise. I'll see you when I get home. She smiled. Have a great day. Santiago got out of the car, closing the door behind him, and Anya watched him walk up to a small boy with glasses and brown hair. Seeing him brought her a feeling of sadness, a melancholy she couldn't quite explain. Was it because he was going to school, and he would be busier now? He wouldn't be hanging around her all day, every day? But isn't that what she wanted? After all, hadn't she told herself that she would only be a friend to him through the summer? The best thing would be that he forget about her, so she suppressed the feelings. Having warm feelings for one human was enough. She couldn't keep adding to the tally. She was already a disgrace. Despite trying to defeat her emotions, the sadness stayed with her the entire day. She hadn't even noticed it until Santiago came home from school that day and called her name from the door. The instant she heard him, the cloud that was hovering over her head lifted, and she grinned, despite herself. And then that's when she knew. She was in trouble. Oh well, can't get any more disgrace than I already am, can I? She thought, and skipped down the stairs, 2 at a time, calling out to Santiago.